So, here's the thing about working third shift at a warehouse. You come home exhausted, covered in dust and sweat, and all you want is a shower and maybe 6 hours of sleep before you have to do it all over again. What you don't expect is to turn onto your street at 7 a.m. on a Thursday and see your entire life spread across the front lawn like some kind of twisted yard sale. My 2009 Silverado with the dented passenger door and the check engine light that's been on since 2019 rolled up to a scene that would have been funny if it wasn't happening to me. My mom, Georgina, was standing there in her bathrobe and slippers, phone out, recording the whole thing like she was some kind of documentary filmmaker. My Xbox was in pieces near the garage door. My clothes were stuffed into trash bags. My weights from the basement were stacked next to my gaming chair. Even my protein powder containers were out there. I sat in my truck for maybe 10 seconds trying to process what I was seeing. The Hendersons across the street were on their porch with coffee mugs. Old man Richard next door was actually in his driveway pretending to check his mailbox at 7 o'clock in the morning. Nobody pretends to check their mailbox at 7 a.m. They were all there for the show. Georgina saw me and started walking toward my truck before I even got out. She was shouting about how I'm 27 years old and sucking them dry like some kind of vampire. How she wants me gone, how this is her house and she's done enabling me. My brother Glenn came out of the garage and kicked my gym bag into the street. He was grinning like this was the best morning of his life, saying they were changing the Wi-Fi password too, calling me a loser. Then my dad, Arnold, came out. He picked up what was left of my Xbox and smashed it against the garage door again. Just really made sure it was destroyed. Started going off about what kind of grown man lives in his parents' basement playing video games all day, how I'm an embarrassment, how the neighbors have been complaining. And right on cue, Richard shouted from his driveway that my truck has been bringing down property values for 2 years and good riddance, like he'd been waiting for permission to say it out loud. I got out of my truck, didn't say anything, just started loading my stuff into the bed. Trash bags full of clothes, my gaming chair, the weights, everything. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or sadness or whatever you'd expect. I was absolutely furious, but I kept my mouth shut and just loaded the truck. Took me maybe 20 minutes. The whole neighborhood got their morning entertainment. When everything was packed, I walked right up to the 3 of them standing there in the driveway looking so proud of themselves. Made eye contact with each one. Georgina with her phone still recording. Glenn with his stupid smirk. Arnold with his arms crossed like he just won something. I told them I hoped they all slept good tonight because in about a week, none of them were going to sleep at all. Then I got in my truck and peeled out. You want to know what's really messed up about this whole thing? I've been planning for this moment for almost 3 years. Not the exact public humiliation part, but I knew this was coming eventually. See, they've been treating me like garbage since I was 24, right after I finished community college. I got my associate's degree in business, started working at the warehouse because it paid decent and had benefits. And they acted like I'd personally embarrassed the whole family. Glenn got his bachelor's degree, works in an office doing something with marketing, wears button-down shirts to work. He's the golden child. Never mind that he's 29 and also lived at home until last year when he moved in with his girlfriend Isla. But somehow when he lived in the basement, it was saving money smartly. And when I did it, I was a parasite. Here's what they don't know. What they never bothered to ask about. When I was 23, my grandfather died and left me $40,000. Not a fortune, but enough to matter. I was supposed to use it for school or a car or whatever. Instead, 3 months later, my parents were 3 months behind on their mortgage. The bank was starting foreclosure paperwork. Arnold's construction business had tanked during CO and they were drowning. I paid off $35,000 of their mortgage. Wrote them a check. We sat at the kitchen table and I told them this was me helping family, but I wanted it documented properly. Arnold said, "Sure, we draw papers, make it official, all that." Georgina cried and hugged me and said I was saving their home. Never happened. No papers, no documentation. I asked about it twice and Arnold said he'd get to it. Then told me to stop being paranoid. This was family. So, I let it go because I was 23 and stupid and actually believed they'd remember what I did for them. Instead, they spent the next 4 years treating me like I was the problem. I worked night shifts, slept during the day, and apparently that made me lazy. I kept my gaming setup in the basement, and suddenly I was a loser who played video games all day. Never mind that I was paying $600 a month for room and board, covering my own food, doing my own laundry, staying out of their way. The real kicker was about 6 months ago when I overheard Georgina on the phone with her sister. She was complaining about me, saying I was almost 30 and still living at home, how embarrassing it was when people asked about me, how she couldn't even tell her book club the truth. She said she wished I'd just leave so they could turn the basement into a proper guest room. That's when I stopped feeling guilty about what I was planning. That's when I started getting everything ready for the moment I knew would eventually come. I'd been saving every dollar I could, working overtime whenever possible, keeping records of every payment I made them. I had bank statements going back years. I had texts and messages where they asked me to cover bills. And I had something they'd completely forgotten about when I gave them that money 4 years ago and Arnold promised to draw up papers. I went to a lawyer on my own, paid $500 for a proper contract, got it notarized, sent it to them certified mail. They had to sign for it and send it back. It gave me a legal claim on the property, not ownership exactly, but a significant stake given the amount I'd put toward their mortgage. Arnold had signed it while watching TV one night, barely read it, tossed it back to me. Georgina signed it the next day. They forgot about it completely. I kept the original in a safety deposit box. So, when I drove away from that house on Thursday morning with my life in trash bags, I wasn't devastated. I was ready. I already had an apartment lined up, had the deposit paid, was moving in that afternoon. I'd been ready for months. The first 3 days were quiet. I got moved into my new place, a one-bedroom about 30 minutes away. Went to work, came home, set up my stuff. My phone stayed silent except for one text from Glenn on Friday that just said, "Wi-Fi password is Family First 2024 in case you forgot." Real mature. I didn't respond. I was waiting. Day 4, nothing. Day 5, nothing. Day 6, my phone rang twice from Georgina, but I didn't answer. Day 7, Arnold left a voicemail asking me to call him back about something important. Real casual, like nothing had happened. Day 8 was Saturday. I woke up to 83 messages. Georgina 6:47 a.m. answer your phone. Where the hell are you? Georgina 6:52 a.m. This is serious, Brian. Call me now. Georgina 7:03 a.m. Your father is losing his mind. You need to call us back. Glenn 7:15 a.m. Dude, mom's legit freaking out. Just text back. Glenn 7:23 a.m. Seriously, what did you do? Arnold 7:30 a.m. Call me immediately. This needs to stop. Arnold 2:11 a.m. I've been asleep. This needs to stop now. Call me back immediately. There were voicemails too. Georgina crying, saying I needed to fix this, asking what I'd done. Arnold demanding I call him and threatening to call the police if I didn't. Glenn saying everyone was asking him questions and he didn't know what to tell them. I made coffee, read through every message, listened to every voicemail. Then I put my phone on silent and went to the gym. Because here's the thing. I told them they wouldn't sleep and I meant it. What they still don't understand is that in about 72 hours, their comfortable little life is going to get a lot more complicated. That house they're so proud of, the one with the manicured lawn and the fresh paint, the one they kicked me out of in front of the entire neighborhood. They're about to find out who actually has the power in this situation. And it's not them. Update 1. Okay, so the comments on my last post were wild. Shout out to everyone who figured out I had some kind of legal leverage. You guys are sharp. And yes, before anyone asks, I know some of you thought I should just let it go and move on. To those people, respectfully, did you miss the part where they threw my stuff on the lawn in front of the entire neighborhood like I was trash? Yeah, I'm not the let it go type. So, Saturday morning, 83 messages. I went to the gym, came back, made lunch, and finally decided it was time to respond. I texted Arnold back around 2 p.m. with just, "Got your messages. What's the emergency?" He called immediately. I let it ring 3 times before answering because I'm petty like that. Arnold was trying to sound calm, but I could hear the panic underneath. He said there was some kind of mistake, some paperwork issue with the house. And did I remember signing anything 4 years ago? I told him, yeah, I remembered. I remembered writing them a check for $35,000. I remembered him promising to draw up proper documents. And I remembered having to go to a lawyer myself because he never did it. There was this pause. Then he said we needed to talk in person. This was too important for the phone. Could I come by the house? I told him absolutely not. I wasn't setting foot in that house after what they did. If he wanted to talk, he could come to my apartment. He showed up 2 hours later with Georgina. Glenn wasn't with them and I found out why later. They knocked and I let them in. Offered them water like we were having some casual visit. Georgina looked like she'd been crying. Arnold looked exhausted. They sat on my couch and Arnold started with how they never meant to hurt me. How kicking me out was tough love because they wanted me to be independent. Georgina jumped in about how they were worried about my future. How I was wasting my potential working at a warehouse. How they thought I needed a wake-up call. I just stared at them, asked if they seriously came here to justify throwing my belongings on the front lawn. Arnold said that was Glenn's idea, that it got out of hand, but the point was to motivate me. I asked how destroying my Xbox was motivating me. Georgina said that was just Arnold losing his temper, that they'd pay for a new one. Then Arnold got to the real reason they were there. He said they'd received a notice from a law office about a property claim, something about the money I gave them 4 years ago. He wanted to know what I'd done, what I'd filed, and why I was trying to take their house. I told him I wasn't trying to take their house. I filed a legal claim for the money I gave them, which according to the contract they both signed, entitled me to either repayment with interest or a stake in the property equity. I said I'd given them 4 years to acknowledge what I did for them, to treat me with basic respect, and instead they humiliated me in front of the whole neighborhood. Georgina started crying harder, said I was going to make them lose their home, that they couldn't afford to pay me back right now, that Arnold's business was barely recovering. She kept saying I was family. How could I do this to family? I reminded her that she was the one who told her sister she was embarrassed of me. That she couldn't even tell her book club the truth about her own son, that she filmed me loading my stuff into trash bags instead of stopping it. Arnold tried to say that was different, that parents are allowed to be frustrated with their kids, but this was crossing a line. So, I asked him what line exactly. Was it the line where I saved their house from foreclosure, or the line where they forgot about it completely and treated me like garbage for 4 years? Arnold said I was being dramatic, that they never treated me like garbage. They just had expectations for me. The conversation went in circles for maybe an hour. Georgina kept saying I was destroying the family. Arnold kept trying to negotiate, asking what I wanted. Could we work something out? I told them the legal process was already started. My lawyer filed everything properly, and they'd be receiving official documentation soon about their options. Arnold asked, what options? I explained they could either pay me back the $35,000 plus 4 years of interest at the rate specified in the contract, or they could acknowledge my stake in the property and we could work out an arrangement, or they could fight it in court and spend money on lawyers, which seemed stupid since they signed the contract. That's when Arnold got angry, really angry. Started saying I was betraying them, that I was being vindictive and petty, that this wasn't about the money but about me being bitter that they pushed me to grow up. He said I was 27 years old, acting like a teenager, that this proved they were right about me all along. Georgina was begging me to stop the legal claim, saying they'd apologize for how they handled things, that we could be a family again. I asked her if she remembered what it felt like to almost lose her house 4 years ago. She nodded. I told her now she knew how serious I was. They left around 6 p.m. Georgina was still crying. Arnold told me I was making a huge mistake and I'd regret this. Sunday was when things got complicated. Glenn called me at 9 a.m. He was furious. Started going off about how I was trying to steal our parents' house, how I was a vindictive psycho, how Isla was freaking out because they'd been planning to move back into the house next year when Arnold and Georgina downsized. Wait, what? I had no idea about this plan. Glenn explained that he and Isla were living in her cramped apartment, but they'd been planning for Arnold and Georgina to sell them the house at a family discount in another year. Isla had been counting on it. They'd been saving for the down payment and now I was ruining everything. I told Glenn that nobody had mentioned any of this to me, not once in 4 years. He said, why would they? I was just living in the basement playing video games. Not exactly part of the family planning sessions. I asked if he knew about the $35,000 I gave them. He said, "Yeah, so what? That was years ago, and I lived there for 4 more years, so it was basically even." I actually laughed. Told him $600 a month for 4 years was less than $30,000. So, actually no, it wasn't even. Glenn said I was being ridiculous. That family doesn't keep score like this. I said family also doesn't throw each other's stuff on the lawn like trash. Glenn said Isla wanted to talk to me. I said no. He asked why I was being such a jerk about everything. I told him he could kick my gym bag into the street, but I was the jerk. He hung up on me. Monday, I had to go to work, but my phone wouldn't stop. Georgina's sister, Catherine, was texting me about what a horrible son I was being. Some cousin I barely knew was messaging me on Facebook about respecting my parents. Glenn was sending screenshots of his conversation with Isla where she was apparently crying about their future being ruined. Tuesday was my day off. I was at the grocery store around 11 a.m. when I ran into Richard, the neighbor, who shouted about my truck bringing down property values. He was in the produce section and actually tried to talk to me. Asked how I was doing. Real friendly, like we were buddies. I kept walking. He followed me to the cereal aisle, saying he'd heard there was some family trouble, that the neighborhood had noticed Arnold and Georgina seemed stressed. I told him that was none of his business. He said, well, actually, it kind of was his business since it involved property values and neighborhood stability. I stopped and looked at him, asked if he was serious right now. Richard said he was just concerned as a neighbor that whatever family dispute we had, it shouldn't affect the whole street. I told him he'd been complaining about my truck for 2 years and now suddenly he cared about me. He said that was different. He was just being honest. But this situation seemed serious. I told Richard that if he was so concerned about property values, maybe he should have thought about that before he joined the audience for my public humiliation. Then I walked away. Wednesday afternoon, Glenn showed up at my apartment with Isla. I didn't want to let them in, but Isla started talking through the door about how they just wanted to understand what was happening. That Glenn told her everything and she wanted to hear my side. I opened the door. Isla looked genuinely upset, not angry, just stressed. We sat in my living room and she explained their whole plan. They'd been saving for 2 years. Arnold and Georgina had promised to sell them the house for $300,000, even though it was worth about $380,000. They were going to move in next summer, start a family there, the whole thing. I asked why nobody told me about this. Glenn said because it didn't involve me. I was just renting a room. Isla told Glenn to stop and asked me to explain the legal claim. So I did. I told her about the $35,000, the contract, everything. Isla looked at Glenn, asked him if he knew about the money. He said, yeah, but that was 4 years ago. She asked if our parents had ever paid it back. He said no, but Brian lived there, so it was basically settled. Isla said that wasn't how money worked. That if Brian had a legal contract, then he had a legitimate claim. Glenn got defensive, started saying Isla was supposed to be on his side, that I was being vindictive and she was supposed to back him up. Isla said she wasn't on anyone's side. She was trying to understand the situation because their entire future plan was falling apart. Then Isla asked me directly what I wanted. Did I want the house? Did I want them to pay me back? Was I trying to force a sale? I told her honestly that I filed the claim because I was tired of being treated like I didn't matter. That the money was real, my contribution was real, and I deserved to be acknowledged. Isla asked if there was any way to work this out without destroying everyone's plans. I said that wasn't my problem to solve. Glenn called me a selfish jerk. Isla told him to shut up. They left arguing with each other. Thursday night, Georgina called me crying, saying Catherine told her she needed to fix this or the whole family would take sides and it would tear everyone apart. She begged me to meet Arnold and her at a restaurant Friday evening to discuss options. I told her I'd think about it. Friday, I agreed to meet them. But here's where it gets even messy. When I showed up at the restaurant at 7:00 p.m., it wasn't just Arnold and Georgina waiting. Glenn was there, Isla was there, and Catherine was there with her husband. Apparently, this wasn't a discussion. This was an intervention. Update 2. So, yeah, walking into that restaurant and seeing 6 people at a table instead of 2 was not what I signed up for. For anyone following along who said, I should have expected this. You're right. I'm an idiot. I should have known Georgina wouldn't just want to talk. She'd want to orchestrate some kind of family tribunal. I stood there for a solid 10 seconds debating whether to just leave. But you know what? I'd spent 4 years being the family punching bag. I could handle one dinner. I sat down at the end of the table. Arnold was at the other end. Georgina was on my right. Glenn and Isla across from me, Catherine and her husband, whose name I barely remember, next to them. The waiter came over looking uncomfortable because the tension was obvious. I ordered water and said I wasn't eating. Catherine started talking first. She's Georgina's older sister. Has this way of acting like she's the family wisdom keeper or something. She said we were all here because family was more important than money. That whatever issues we had could be worked out if everyone just communicated respectfully and remembered that we loved each other. I asked if throwing my Xbox against a garage door was communicating respectfully. Catherine said that wasn't helpful, that we needed to focus on solutions, not past grievances. Glenn said the Xbox wasn't even the point, that I was trying to take the house. Catherine's husband nodded along like he had any idea what was happening. Arnold cut in and said, maybe we should start with everyone explaining their perspective. He said from his view, I'd lived at home for years after college. They'd supported me and yes, they'd accepted money from me, but I'd lived there, so it balanced out. He said the public scene was regrettable, but they'd been frustrated and wanted me to be independent. Georgina added that they never meant to hurt me, that parents sometimes have to make tough choices, and she was sorry I felt disrespected, but this legal claim was too far. She said families work things out privately, not through lawyers and courts. I waited until they were done. Then I asked Arnold if he remembered what he said to me the night I gave him that check. He looked confused. I reminded him. He told me I was saving our family, that he'd never forget what I was doing, that when things got better, he'd make sure I was taken care of. Arnold said he did remember something like that, but it was 4 years ago and circumstances change. I asked what circumstances changed exactly. He said I was supposed to use that time to get on my feet, save money, move forward with my life. Instead, I worked at a warehouse and played video games. Glenn jumped in saying that was exactly the problem, that I had no ambition, that I was comfortable being mediocre. Isla put her hand on his arm. But he kept going. Said I could have done something with my degree, found a real career, made something of myself. Instead, I worked third shift at a warehouse like someone who didn't finish high school. Catherine said that wasn't constructive. But Arnold was nodding. He said Glenn had a point, that they'd hoped giving me space at home would help me launch into a real career, but I seemed content to stay stagnant. I asked them if they knew what I made at the warehouse. Nobody answered. I told them $62,000 a year with full benefits, overtime opportunities, and a 401k match. Glenn looked skeptical. I said I could show them my pay stubs if they didn't believe me. Isla asked why I never mentioned that. I said because nobody ever asked. They just assumed warehouse worker meant minimum wage and failure. Georgina said, well, regardless of what I made, living in your parents' basement at 27 wasn't exactly success. This is where I started getting really angry. I asked Georgina what success looked like then. She said having your own place, being independent, building a life. I pointed out that Glenn lived at home until he was 28 and nobody humiliated him about it. Arnold said that was different because Glenn had a plan. I asked what plan. Glenn said he was saving for a house, which is exactly what he did. I asked how much he'd saved. He said that wasn't relevant. I said actually it was super relevant because I'd been saving too. I had $40,000 in my savings account right now, more than enough for a down payment, but nobody bothered to ask about my finances because they'd already decided I was a failure. The table went quiet. Catherine's husband took a drink of water. Georgina said if I had $40,000 saved, then why was I living at home? I told her because I was also saving for other things, because $600 a month in rent was cheaper than anywhere else. And because I actually didn't mind living there until they made it clear they were ashamed of me. Arnold said they were never ashamed. I pulled out my phone and asked Georgina if she wanted me to play the recording I had of her phone call with Catherine from 6 months ago. The one where she said she couldn't tell her book club about me, where she called me an embarrassment. Georgina went pale. Catherine said I'd recorded her without permission. I said I didn't record anyone. I overheard a conversation in my own house and decided to make note of it. Arnold asked what else I'd been documenting. I said enough. Glenn said this was insane, that I was acting paranoid and vindictive. Isla told him to let me finish. Glenn snapped at her that she needed to pick a side. She said she wasn't picking sides. She was trying to understand what happened. Catherine tried to redirect. She said, okay, clearly there were hurt feelings on both sides, but the immediate issue was the legal claim. She asked if I'd consider dropping it in exchange for an apology and some kind of family therapy. I actually laughed, said family therapy wasn't going to solve 4 years of being treated like garbage. Arnold said I was exaggerating, that they'd been hard on me sometimes, but that's what parents do. I asked if parents also promise to document loans and then don't. If parents also smash their kids' belongings. If parents also film their kids loading trash bags into a truck while the neighbors watch. Georgina started crying, said I was making it sound worse than it was, that they'd had a bad morning and handled things poorly. Glenn said, yeah, they messed up, but I was overreacting by bringing lawyers into it. I asked how I should have reacted instead. Glenn said like an adult. Said I should have had a conversation with them, worked it out, not gone nuclear with legal action. I reminded him that I tried having conversations for 4 years and got nowhere. He said I never actually tried. I just sulked in the basement. Isla said that wasn't fair. Glenn turned to her and said he couldn't believe she was defending me. She said she wasn't defending anyone. But clearly Brian had tried to talk about things and nobody listened. Glenn said she didn't know that. Isla said, actually, Brian just told us he saved $40,000 and nobody knew because nobody asked, which seemed like not listening. This started a fight between Glenn and Isla right. He shoved me, not hard, but enough that I stepped back, asked if I was really going to do this, if I was really going to destroy everything because I was both hurt about some comments. I got in my truck and locked the doors. Glenn stood there yelling through the window about how I was dead to him, how I'd regret this, how the whole family would turn against me. I drove off. That was Friday night. It's Sunday now and things have gotten worse. Georgina called yesterday saying they contacted a real estate agent to get the house appraised, that they're going to try to sell it themselves before the legal process forces anything. Arnold texted that they found a lawyer who said my contract might not hold up in court. And Glenn posted on Facebook this morning. Long post about family loyalty and betrayal. Didn't name me specifically, but everyone knows his friends are commenting supportive things. Isla hasn't commented at all. My phone's been buzzing with extended family members I haven't talked to in years, suddenly having opinions. But here's what none of them know yet. There's more to this situation than just the house. And they're about to find out. Final update. Alright, so for everyone who's been following this mess, buckle up because the last 2 weeks have been absolutely wild. And to the people in my DMs telling me I'm tearing my family apart, yeah, I know that's exactly what I intended. So, after the restaurant disaster, Glenn's Facebook post went semi-viral in our family circle. Cousins I haven't seen since I was 12 were suddenly in the comments talking about how disappointed they were in me. Catherine shared it with some emotional caption about how modern society has lost respect for parents. The whole thing was performing family loyalty for social media points. What made it perfect was that Glenn still hadn't named me specifically, so he looked like he was vague, posting about some unnamed betrayal. A bunch of his friends were commenting asking what happened. I screenshot the whole thing from my records. Not because I needed it legally, but because I wanted to remember how pathetic it was. Monday morning, my lawyer called. The parents' lawyer had reached out wanting to negotiate. My lawyer said their position was that the contract was signed under duress, that I'd pressured them when they were vulnerable about losing their house. I told my lawyer that was complete garbage. I had the certified mail receipt showing they signed it and returned it weeks after I gave them the money. There was no duress. He said he figured, but that's what they were claiming. We had a conference call scheduled for Wednesday with both lawyers present. My lawyer asked what my bottom line was. I told him I wanted either full repayment with interest, which the contract specified at 6% annually, or I wanted my proportional stake in the property equity recognized. He said given the current market, their house was probably worth around $420,000. And with their remaining mortgage of about $280,000, they had $140,000 in equity. My $35,000 4 years ago with interest was about $43,000 now. But here's the thing. My contribution had gone toward the principal when they were facing foreclosure. The lawyer explained that technically I could argue I was entitled to a percentage of the equity based on my contribution to the total value. We ran numbers and it could be argued I was owed somewhere between $50,000 and $65,000 depending on how it was calculated. I told him to push for the high end. He asked if I was sure that it might force a sale. I said that's fine. Tuesday, Georgina showed up at my apartment at 6 a.m. I was getting ready for work and heard banging on my door. I opened it and she was standing there looking like she hadn't slept, asking if we could please talk before the lawyer call tomorrow. I told her we could talk right there in the doorway because I had to leave for work in 20 minutes. She started with how she'd been thinking about everything I said, about how they'd treated me, and she understood now that they'd hurt me. She said she'd been wrong to compare me to Glenn, that she realized she'd put pressure on me that wasn't fair. I asked what she meant by comparing me to Glenn. Georgina said that after Glenn got his degree and started his career, Arnold had been so proud talking about Glenn constantly and she'd felt like she should be equally proud of both her sons, but she couldn't figure out how to talk about me. She said her friends all had kids who were lawyers and doctors and teachers. And when they asked about me, she didn't know what to say. That sounded impressive. I asked if she realized how messed up that was. She said yes, she did now. But at the time, she thought she was motivating me. She thought if they pushed me hard enough, I'd want to prove them wrong. I told her that wasn't motivation. That was just cruelty with extra steps. She asked if I remembered when I was 25 and talked about maybe going back to school for engineering. I did remember. I'd mentioned it at dinner once. She said Arnold had been excited about that they'd both thought maybe that was my path. When I didn't pursue it, they'd been disappointed. I told Georgina that I'd looked into engineering programs and they were expensive and I'd already spent my inheritance money saving their house. She went quiet. Then she said they never asked me to do that it was my choice. I reminded her she'd cried and hugged me and said I was saving the family. She said she meant it at the time, but I'd made that choice and I couldn't hold it over them forever. This is where I got really angry. I told her I wasn't holding it over them. I was collecting on a legal debt that they'd signed a contract acknowledging. She said the contract was just a formality, that she'd signed it because Arnold told her to, and she didn't think it meant anything. I asked how you sign a legal document and think it means nothing. Georgina said because it was family. Because she trusted that we'd work things out like family does. I told her we could have worked things out if they treated me like family instead of an embarrassment. She started crying again and said she was sorry that she'd apologize to everyone, that they'd make it right somehow if I just dropped the claim. I said no. She asked what would make me happy then. I told her nothing would make me happy, that I didn't want reconciliation or apologies. I wanted what I was legally owed. She said I was going to force them out of their home over pride. I said no. Over $43,000 and 4 years of disrespect. She left and I went to work. Got about 30 texts during my shift from various family members who'd apparently been contacted by Georgina asking them to talk sense into me. Wednesday's conference call was brutal. Their lawyer opened by saying the contract was questionable because it was presented during a financial crisis that it could be argued I'd taken advantage of their desperation. My lawyer countered with the timeline showing they'd signed and returned it weeks after receiving the money, that there were multiple opportunities to decline or negotiate, and that they'd accepted the money without any contestation for 4 years. Their lawyer said they'd been making good faith payments by housing me. My lawyer said $600 monthly for a room doesn't equate to a $35,000 loan plus interest. Their lawyer argued it wasn't just room, it was family support and meals. My lawyer asked if they had documentation of this alleged family support arrangement. They didn't. Arnold got on the line and said this was ridiculous, that they'd raised me for 18 years and I was acting like they owed me. My lawyer pointed out that raising your child is a legal obligation, not a debt to be repaid. Arnold said he didn't raise me to be vindictive. My lawyer said we were getting off track. The call lasted 90 minutes. Their lawyer finally said they needed time to discuss options with Arnold and Georgina. My lawyer said fine, but the clock was ticking and the legal process would continue moving forward. We hung up. Thursday, I went to the gym after work and ran into someone I knew from high school. We started talking and he mentioned he'd heard I was in some family situation. I asked where he heard that. He said his mom was in Georgina's book club and apparently it was the hot topic last week. Great. He asked if it was true I was trying to take my parents' house. I asked if he wanted the real story or the version Georgina was telling. He said both. So, I explained the whole thing while we were on treadmills. He listened and then said, honestly, it sounded like my parents screwed me over, and I had every right to collect. I appreciated that. Friday afternoon, my lawyer called. Arnold and Georgina had agreed to sell the house. They'd accepted they couldn't fight the contract and couldn't afford to pay me back. The plan was to list it within 2 weeks, and once it's sold, I'd get my portion from the proceeds before they got theirs. Their lawyers said they were looking at downsizing to a condo or apartment. I asked about Glenn and Isla's plans to buy the house. My lawyer said that wasn't his concern and legally didn't factor into anything. I said I knew. I was just curious. He said their lawyer mentioned Glenn had offered to buy the house himself, but couldn't qualify for a mortgage big enough to cover both the existing mortgage and my claim. Saturday, Glenn called me. He sounded exhausted. He said Isla had broken up with him. I didn't say anything. He said she'd told him she couldn't marry someone who blamed everyone else for their problems and never took responsibility for anything. He said it was my fault, that if I hadn't filed the claim, everything would have been fine. I asked Glenn if he'd ever actually thought about what happened. He said, yeah, he'd thought about it constantly for 2 weeks. I said no. Had he thought about the 4 years before that about how they treated me? He said they were just trying to help me grow up. I said by destroying my Xbox and filming me loading trash bags. Glenn said that was one bad morning. I said it was one bad morning after 4 years of being treated like I didn't matter. Glenn said I mattered. I just wasn't living up to my potential. I asked who decided what my potential was. He didn't answer. Then Glenn said something that actually surprised me. He said Arnold had always wanted both of us to go into construction with him. That when Glenn chose marketing instead, Arnold had been disappointed but accepted it because Glenn had a college degree and a career path. When I chose warehouse work, Arnold felt like I was deliberately rejecting him and everything he'd built. I asked why nobody ever told me that. Glenn said because Arnold didn't want to pressure me. I said so. Instead, he just treated me like a failure. Glenn said Arnold didn't know how to handle disappointment. I said that sounded like a him problem. Glenn asked if there was any way to fix this. I asked if he meant fix the legal situation or fix the family. He said both. I told him the legal situation was done. The house was selling. As for the family, I said that ship had sailed. Glenn said Isla leaving had made him realize how much he'd been making excuses for everyone, himself included. He said maybe I was right that they treated me badly. I said maybe. He said he was sorry. I told him sorry didn't change anything. He asked if I'd ever forgive them. I said I didn't know and honestly didn't care. He said family was supposed to stick together. I reminded him he'd kicked my gym bag into the street and called me a loser. He said he was angry that morning. I said so was I, and I'd stayed angry. We hung up. Haven't talked to him since. Sunday, I drove past the house. There was a for sale sign in the yard. The Hendersons were outside and watched me drive by. I didn't wave. Monday, my lawyer confirmed the listing was active. He said based on comparable sales, they'd probably get around $415,000 to $425,000. After the existing mortgage and my claim, Arnold and Georgina would walk away with around $90,000 to $95,000. Not nothing, but not enough to buy another house in this market without a mortgage. Tuesday, Catherine texted me asking if I was happy now. I didn't respond. Wednesday, Georgina sent me a long text about how they'd found a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex across town, how humiliating it was to downsize at their age, how the neighbors were all talking. I didn't respond. Thursday, Arnold sent a message saying he hoped I understood what I'd done, that I'd destroyed the family over money, that I'd have to live with that. I responded with just, "I'll sleep fine." The house is under contract now. Should close in about 3 weeks. My lawyer says once it's done and I get my payout, the legal relationship ends. The family relationship ended 2 weeks ago when I walked out of that restaurant. Glenn updated his relationship status to single on Friday. A bunch of people commented asking what happened. He hasn't responded to anyone. Catherine called me yesterday saying I need to fix this, that Georgina is depressed, Arnold won't talk to anyone. The family is fractured. I told her the family was already fractured. I just made it obvious. She said I was being cruel. I said I learned from the best. Some people are probably reading this thinking I'm a horrible person. Maybe I am. But you know what? That morning when I came home to find my life on the front lawn when I watched my dad smash my Xbox. When I heard the neighbors laughing, I promised them they wouldn't sleep. I kept that promise. They're moving out in 2 weeks. I'll get a check for somewhere around $65,000 once everything closes. I'm not going to the closing. My lawyer will handle it. And that threat I made about them not sleeping, turns out I was right. Georgina texted me at 3 a.m. last night saying she couldn't sleep, asking if I was satisfied. I was asleep, so yeah, I guess I was. Hope they all sleep good in their new apartment because I'll be sleeping just fine knowing I don't owe them anything anymore. This is Hidden Lies. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.